All right, I want to take you through my pre-running warm-up. Now, to be fair, it's not one that I do every time I go for a run. It's something I probably take elements of each run, but I do this whole thing if I'm feeling a little bit wrecked or I'm going on a particularly long or hard or important run. So I start with a ball, and I'm going to put the ball under the foot. Now, usually when we put a ball to foot, people just randomly roll around in it willy-nilly, which does bugger all really. What we want to do, or what I want to do, is I'm going to rub this or put pressure as I roll from my big toe joint to my little toe joint up and down. And I'm letting each toe joint move, I guess, kind of like a piano, if that makes sense, making each joint move up and down. Then I go under the arch and I'm going to put pressure up and down. So my goal here is to get joints to move rather than just try and roll along some tissue. Though on the back here, I am going to roll around the front of the heel to just give a bit of love to that area where the plantar fascia connects. Do both feet. Sometimes I'll do this later in my warm up, but it makes sense to do it now at the start here, just for the way I'm going to show it to you. Pressure on the arch, around the foot. Then what I want to do is I'm going to hold under here, put my hand on my tibia, and I want to make sure my tibia can rotate. Now you can do this on the ground. Sometimes I do standing up because I just get a bit of single leg work in as well. And here I want to make sure this bone can move as my little toe goes out, my big toe goes in. Now often you'll see people just invert and evert the foot. We want it to flat plane, make sure this bone can move. And go little toe out, come up, big toe in. So here we're making sure the muscle that controls rotation, the popliteus, can work rather than the hamstrings doing the job. But that's not really, I guess, my primary goal for it. It's more just making sure that tibia is moving. Making sure joints can move before we go and load them. Okay, then I'll do the hip. Usually I'll hang on to something with this, but I'm going to go knee up, out, lift the foot to internally rotate the femur, come back and around. Now when I come back, lift the knee, the foot comes in, I externally rotate the femur. So I'll do this loosely a couple of times. Then I want to do it under some tension, so I'll hold on for this. Now under tension, I want to make sure all the bones that control that rotation are turning on and working. So create some tension in my abdomen. Tension around the hip and coming out. Lifting the foot. Pushing back. Coming up. So I'm making sure I'm not losing my back here. There's tension here to give the work to the hip rather than let other areas compensate. Other side, just loosely around. So I'm probably speeding this up a little bit. Then under some tension. Foot comes up to rotate. Then I'll do my torso, so I'll let my rib cage come in, turn to the right, rib cage up, rotate back around. A lot of runners don't realise how important it is to be able to move this part of the body. The next part of my warm-up takes that into consideration. When I come on to shift the weight to my toes, I want to be able to anteriorly tilt my pelvis, lift the rib cage, come up like this. Then I'll posteriorly tilt. Now I know this looks a bit funny. I'm not going to explain everything about it here, other than the fact that as my weight comes into these areas of my feet, I want my body to be able to do these movements. So here, coming into my toes, anterior tilt, chest up. As I come onto my heels, posterior tilt, chest down. Okay, and then I'll work on whatever kind of, this is in, I did an article where I said, you need to work on your shit is one thing you need to do in your warm-up. So this is where I work on my own shit. And a lot of it comes from, I've got a surgery site around my hip that causes all other problems, which is what most of my warm-up is based on. So what I'm going to do first is, actually I'm going to go to the foot first. So I would have already done this kind of work with the foot. And I have a lot of trouble pronating this foot as a result of my hip. Now a lot of you might think that you shouldn't pronate your foot, but you would be very confused. Because we need to be able to pronate our foot in order for everything else to react to that movement of the foot. So for example, a lot of people think that this is pronation. This is the foot just everting. Pronation is a movement. So I want to make sure that the joints in my feet can move in order to give me good toe off and foot strike and just everything else that goes with running. Now, this is my particular, I guess, easy spot to go to just to create some movement in the foot. And I just get a little bit of this movement in the foot. So the middle of the foot here is coming in, coming out without losing contact with any of my toes. So often we think that this is pronation, but everything's just collapsed here, right? Often the inability to use glutes can be tied with this as well. Like, you know, if our foot comes in, if we pronate, we need to come back out of it. So here everything's internally rotated. We need to be able to externally rotate out to supinate, and our glute can play a role in that. And on that note, the next thing I'll do is work on supination of the other foot. Okay, so here, my left foot's the one that I usually tend to work on for this. So here I want to make sure as I turn, my foot doesn't lose contact and roll open. I see this, I also want to extend my knee back here. I can see a problem with this with a lot of runners. They have an early knee bend. They don't get good triple extension at ankle, knee and hip. So this is an exercise I often give to some runners for that. So if I find I'm losing my big toe, sometimes I'll just give it a bit of point of contact to make sure that all the joints on the outside of my foot can open here. But that hasn't been a problem recently, so I tend to just come in and out here. Making sure I can straighten my knee, which sometimes is a problem. So I'm making sure my feet can pronate, supinate before I run. All sorts of problems if they can't. Then I'll move on to my hip, which is where a lot of the problems usually are. So I'll release my right TFL with a ball. So here I look to find a bony part, pop the ball under there, and here I'm just going to place that ball on the TFL, move up and down a bit, side to side. Then just hang on here, give it a bit of pressure, and move the foot up and down. So here I give it a bit of an active release. Then I come into this sort of stretch, show on this side. So I can come around, grab the foot, and here I'm going to press the outside of my hip forward as I turn, and I can feel all that whole lateral quad TFL opening a bit. Let's take a few nice long breaths here and chill out. And then what I want to do is I want to start pushing my foot and hand together. Similar to if you've done P&F stretching before, you do some contract, relax. But here I'm just going to contract. Hold that for around 10 seconds. Then I'll leave my foot here. Now I'm making my hamstring learn this range of motion of my hip flexor. So if you're someone who believes in pose running, this one's really important for you because you'll know that it's a bit of a pickup of the heel in that style of running. That can sometimes be limited by the tightness in the quad. But if you just stretch a quad and don't allow the hamstring to understand that range of motion, then it's not really going to improve that type of style. So give a bit of contraction into it and hold it here. Then I might come forward and do a bit more. My next drill, so that my knee doesn't get cranky, so I'll do kind of like a clock drill here. So here, just looking at touching around as far as I can with my foot. And I don't mind here if my knee's collapsing in like this, because it's going to give the medial fibers of my quad something to do. Some people will refer to this as a VMO. It can be a good VMO exercise. You probably feel your glute med fire a bit too. I really like this one actually. So I'm just tapping my foot as I go. I don't care where this knee goes, letting it go where it wants. Okay, and then I like to do just a bit, actually I usually do this on this side only. So I have problems sometimes with this glute med because this TFL takes over so much. So I'll just knee drive, come back, got my hand here making sure I can feel my glute med kicking in. As I go, I'm going to try and drop this hip towards the ground more too. And my last thing is I push this little toe on the ground, tuck the hip under, coming across here. So this, you'll feel this in the bottom of your psoas. But I do this because of my hip surgery. When I run, my hip tends to want to stay here. So I'm making sure it can also go here. Before I used to do this, I used to get a lot of pain, TFL, and I had some ITB pain for a long time that I stupidly ran through. But this little routine means I don't get any of that anymore. I also get a lot of nerve pain around my knee and my hip, but it all really stems from a lot of scarring around this hip. And then I'll go for my little jog. I might put in some little drills, and then I'm ready to go without wrecking myself and making sure I'm ready for my best performance.